Okay. Hello, everyone. This is Lisa Ruggiero. I'm a program coordinator at the Syracuse University Environmental Finance Center. On behalf of the Environmental Finance Center Network, I would like to welcome you to our webinar entitled Asset Management IQ. How much do you know about AM tools and resources? This session is one of several webinars conducted by the Environmental Finance Center Network for the Smart Management for Small Water Systems project. The EFCN provides training and technical assistance to small public water systems in all 50 states and 5 territories to help local water systems achieve and maintain compliance with the Safe Water Drinking Act. Workshops, trainings, and direct assistance are provided on asset management, water loss reduction, water system collaboration, fiscal planning and rate setting, energy management, funding coordination, and managerial and financial leadership. I'm going to be providing some technical support today. So please take a moment to observe your GoToWebinar control panel. Most of the functions that you'll see are self-explanatory, but I would like to draw your attention to the questions section on your control panel. During today's session, you will all be kept on mute to ensure audio quality and minimize background noise. Should you have a question, please type it into the GoToWebinar question dialog box. We will be holding all questions until the end of today's presentation to ensure that we end on time. And we have over 200 registrants today, and we'll try to get to as many questions as we can. Our presenters today have consented to share their slides with you, and we will make the slides available, as well as a video recording following the webinar on the EFCN website at efcnetwork.org. Please allow 1 week for the processing and posting of these materials. And here with me today, I have some of my wonderful EFCN colleagues. Ms. Lexi Kay is here to help me out with technical support. Lexi, are you there?
Hi, everyone.
Great. And Dawn Knoll is one of our wonderful presenters today. Dawn, I see you're on mute, so just unmute yourself to say hi to everyone.
Is it working now?
Great. Yep, we can hear you. And of course, our magnificent asset management guru, Miss Heather Himmelberger.
Hi, Lisa. How are you?
I'm great, thanks. Okay, so now that everyone's audio is coming through, I will turn it over to Heather.
Good morning if you're out here in the west like I am, or good afternoon if you're on the eastern part of the country. We have a map showing right now that shows where all the attendees registered from, so we have a nice cross-section of folks across the U.S. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for attending today's webinar. This is a little bit of a non-traditional webinar for us. We're just going to be discussing some free tools and resources that are available for you to help with your asset management planning and implementation. So we're not going to be discussing asset management per se, or defining it, or talking about what it's all about, but rather we're going to talk about some tools that you can use to help you with your asset management journey. As Lisa mentioned, please enter any questions you have as we're going through this process. Enter the questions in the chat box. We anticipate that we'll have plenty of time to answer questions, so we'll answer as many as we can at the end of the webinar. So again, please, as you're going along, if there's something that you have a question about, please go ahead and write the question in the chat box. So I'm going to be going over the Asset Management IQ tool that we developed, and then Dawn Knoll is going to be talking about the asset inventory tools and resources that we have available to you. So the first thing I wanted to mention is there's actually 2 different ways that you can get to the Asset Management IQ. The first way is through the Southwest Environmental Finance Center website. And our website, you can see at the top, is southwestefc.unm.edu, or you can just search for Southwest EFC in the Google search box, and we should come up. Typically, we're the first group that comes up. So one way is to go to our website, and you can see on the left-hand side there's a direct link to the AMIQ. You click on that link, and then there's actually two different links that will take you to the same place. You can either click on Interactive Asset Management IQ, or clicking here either way takes you to the Asset Management IQ. The other way to get there is the Environmental Finance Center Network website. As Lisa mentioned, it's efcnetwork.org, and this website is a collection of all of the things related to the Smart Management for Small Water System project. If you look on that website under Resources and Tools, you will see that it's about the third tool down on the list is the Asset Management IQ tool. So you will notice that it brings you to the very same place. So either way, whether you want to use our website or the Environmental Finance Center Network website, it will take you to the same place. So feel free to use either way to access the tool. When you get there, you will actually have a couple of choices of accessing the Asset Management IQ online, which we'll go over in a minute, or accessing it in written format where there's a printable PDF. So just a little bit about why we developed this Asset Management IQ tool. We wanted to provide a baseline before you begin your asset management activities. So before you really go full scale in developing a program, we wanted you to kind of know where you were at, where your system was kind of located in terms of activity, to give you a place that you were starting from, so that later on you could figure out what progress you've made by doing the tool again. So the first reason was to kind of give you a baseline of your asset management practice before you start. And you will notice that even if you haven't done formal asset management per se, you do many things related to asset management. So it was also to give you an idea of what you're already doing today that impacts asset management. Another reason we did it was to help you identify strengths and weaknesses in your current program, or as you go through your asset management program, to allow you to see what the strengths and weaknesses are later on. This can also help you in choosing a starting point, because you may choose to start with the strengths that you have and build on those, or you may choose to start with the weaknesses where you have more opportunity for improvement with less resources and in a quicker time frame. So you can either start with what you're strong and build from there and build confidence, or you can start with where you're weaker and build up from there. We wanted to have a tool that would be able to assess your progress in a given activity or overall. So again, the tool, if you take it at various points, like maybe you do it once a year, or you do it every 6 months, or you do it after you've implemented some big programs for a while, you can see what your scores are later, compare them to the scores you had before, and that will give you an idea of how much progress you've made in a given area or how much progress you've made overall. And then finally, we wanted to have a tool that would help state funders or regulators with having a means to assess what asset management practice was at a given utility. Because it's hard for a regulator or a funder when they're giving you bonus points or incentives to do asset management, it might be hard for them to know whether you're doing asset management or not, or what you're doing in that regard. So this tool was also meant to be sort of a help for them to kind of get a feel for what activities they would like a system to do in asset management. At this point, I would like to acknowledge the Kansas Department of Public Health and Environment because they were gracious enough to allow us to make this tool available for free. They funded the development of the tool as part of our AM Can Work guidebook. And it is included in that guidebook, but we've made it independently available as well. And I would just like to thank them and acknowledge them for being willing to fund this and for allowing us to make it available to everyone else. So the AMIQ itself is a series of 30 questions divided into 6 different sections, and you can see on the right-hand side section 1 through 6. Section 1 is a general set of questions about asset management. And then sections 2 through 6 refer to the 5 core components of asset management. So section 2 relates to the current state of the assets, section 3 level of service, section 4 criticality, section 5 life cycle costing, and section 6 is long-term funding. So let's open up one of the sections so you can get, actually I'm sorry, I want to do one more thing. I just wanted to bring up that there is a way to do a printable PDF if you don't want to do the online version, or if you want to use it in a different kind of setting. You can download this printable PDF that should now be showing on your screen. Just print this off, and then instead of doing it online, you would just circle the answer that you want, and you could keep the paper version of the Asset Management IQ rather than doing the online version. So that's an option if you would like to bring it to a meeting, or you would like to do it in a way that is not on the computer. We do recommend, if you do this, put the date at the top of the paper and put the name of whoever filled out the Asset Management IQ just for your records. So let's go back to the electronic version. We'll open up section 1. And every section looks similar with a question at the top. And again, there's five questions for each section. So the question at the top, and then there's 6 responses. The first response is always a 0-point answer, and the final response is always a 5-point answer. So the 0-point answer is if you're not doing anything in that particular area, you'll pick 0. The 5-point answer is you're kind of doing the best practice for that particular area. Doesn't mean you can't improve beyond that, but you're already at a level that we feel like is pretty good practice in that area, and you've kind of gotten where you needed to go. The points 1 through 4 kind of are between those extremes. You're doing a little bit or you're doing a lot in that particular area. We would suggest that you answer the questions as honestly as possible. You want to know what your current practice is. This is really a tool meant for you to assess your own utility. So please be brutally honest with yourself as you're answering the questions. Don't just go through picking 5s for every answer, knowing that that's ultimately where you want to be, because it won't really help you assess where you are. And especially at the beginning, if you give yourself artificially high scores, it's going to be harder to actually see the progress going forward. In a small community, 1 or 2 people might know the answers to all the questions. In a larger community, it might take more people. In particular, questions in section 6 that relate to finance may require a few more folks to answer because you might not know all the details about the rates and finances of your system. So let's take a look at a couple of questions just to give you an idea of what we're talking about. So question 1, is asset management terminology understood throughout the organization? So the 0 point is no one in the organization understands the terminology. You don't have any knowledge of asset management, so that would be a 0. If one person understands that and they've gone through training and you know what some of the concepts and terminology, that can be a point. If less than half of the people, in other words, just a few key people understand, that would be a 2-point answer. If more than 50% understand it, that's a 3-point answer. If all, and we've referenced all, meaning that greater than 90% of the organization's personnel understand the terminology. And finally, our 5-point answer is throughout the entire organization, people would be able to state what asset management is, understand the asset management concepts and terminology. So let's say you've had 1 person attend training, you would give yourself a 1. You would do likewise with all of these questions. I'm just going to put a few answers in just so we can see the results without really going through each of the questions. At the bottom of each section, you'll get a score for the section, and the score is always out of 30. So in this case, I got 12 points out of 30, and then it will give me a cumulative score. So if I want to move on to the next section, I can go to section 2. Or I can use down at the bottom, I can just hit the next page. So either way will take me to the next section. And again, I'm just going to click through some answers just so you can see what it's like to get results. In this case, I got an 11, 23. Let's go next to section 3. This would be the section on level of service. So we'll give ourselves some points for these questions again, just so you can get an idea of what this looks like as you start putting answers in. If you were doing this yourself, we have done this with many utilities and timed how long it takes for the typical utility to get through. And it's usually about a 25-minute process to 45 minutes, depending on how familiar you are with the asset management that's going on in your utility. So the more familiar you are, maybe the less time it will take you, and the less familiar you are, maybe the more time it would take you. Or if you need to ask somebody else in your organization, you know, maybe it takes you a couple extra minutes. And as you might have noticed, if you decide to change your answer, it's no problem. You just click a different answer and it will adjust the score. So you can see the score at the bottom adjusting as I change my answers if I've chosen the incorrect answer. We're on section 6 now. So this is financial questions, and as again what I mentioned is you may have a need to ask somebody else the financial questions. If you're an operator or a manager, maybe you don't have all that information at your fingertips. When you get to the end, there's a results page. The results page will have the scores for each section as well as my cumulative score. My score is out of 130, so I have 80 points out of 130. And then you can enter your name. So I will put in Heather and let it fill in my name. And my utility is A, B, C, D, E, water. And then you can print it, letter or portrait, whichever you prefer, and then click Download Results PDF. And we highly recommend that anytime you do this, make sure you print out the results, and you will note here that the date is automatically put on your results, so you know the day that you completed this work. Please note that it is not stored online. It is not stored on our server or anybody else's server, so if you don't download the PDF and you just close the window, you will lose your results. So please make sure if you take the time to actually go through the survey that you do download the results and get the printed PDF. It also prints out all of the individual questions so that you'll have a chance to see what your results are. You can either save this electronically, you know, as a PDF on your computer, or you can print it out, whichever you prefer, or you can do both. Again, we really highly recommend you print it out and save it or store it on your computer because it won't be there later on. You don't need to worry that your score would be 0 because that is not going to be the case for any utility. Every utility is doing some things related to general asset management or current state of the assets, even though maybe you haven't thought about it that way. You're all doing something. So the scores won't be 0. So you don't have to worry. That's a common concern that I've heard is, you know, what if we score 0? You know, how bad would that be? Again, don't worry about it because you won't score 0. You might have a lower score when you first start out, but that's okay. It just means there's a lot of room to get improvements relatively quickly. The higher your scores are, it's actually more effort to get incremental changes. The lower your scores are, you can actually have changes more quickly. So it's okay if your scores are low. It just means that you have more opportunities for benefits and to achieve things from doing an asset management program. It's extremely important for you to measure the success of your program because you'll want to see that doing asset management has had a benefit for your utility, because that's the way you get support from your upper management and the way you get financing to be able to do more asset management activities. This tool is one way to help you measure success of your program, and by looking at the score improvement overall per section or even per question from one year to the next or one time period to the next, you can measure those improvements that you've had. Also, it can be really hard to see your own improvement. You're kind of in the day-to-day grind of doing work, and so it might be difficult for you to actually measure your own progress or see how far you've come. Having that baseline before you start and comparing it to where you are now will actually be able to help you figure out that yes, you have made progress, you've come a long way. You know, maybe that first question we talked about, nobody understood asset management, you know, when we first started, but now a year later, half the people know it. And that's just one measure of how embedded asset management is in your organization. By looking at who can speak the terminology, that helps us know how embedded the process is. Excuse me. I also want to mention that the American Waterworks Association is in the process right now of finalizing an asset management practice survey that will be going out very soon. It was based off this asset management IQ process, and it's a series of questions approximately the same length of this IQ process that again goes through the 6 different kinds of questions, general questions, and then each of the 5 core components. And we're trying to assess what the current practice is and strengths and weaknesses across the entire country so that that will help us figure out resources that can be provided in the future. You know, what kind of tools do people need? So if you would like to participate in that process, we would greatly appreciate it. The more responses, the better we are. So when the announcement is finalized from the American Waterworks Association, we'll make sure to get the link out to everybody, and if you would like to take that survey, again, please do so because it will be very helpful to know the status of asset management progress across the country. At this point, we're going to switch gears and talk about tools that can be used in other areas, primarily the asset inventory process, but we do have a few other tools that Dawn is going to talk about. What I wanted to mention is the tools that are specific to the asset inventory. We're going to talk about a database and a spreadsheet. These are just starting points. You may ultimately want to have a more sophisticated program. There are many, many, many asset management programs on the market. There are anything from free programs that are available from EPA, such as the checkup program for small systems, all the way up to programs that are quite expensive, and there's everything in between. So you're going to be able to find a program that does what you want. But the most important thing is you need to be really clear about what exactly you want an asset management or asset inventory program to do for you. What information do you want to be able to put into it? What information do you want to be able to get out of it? What level of technology are you comfortable with? Do you want it tied to a GIS program or not? What price can you afford to pay? Would you be needing training if you bought a particular program, or would you be able to do it on your own? Before you do an investment of money into a program, you really want to have a very good handle on those items of what you want it to do. So sometimes it's better to start with a simpler technology initially while you're getting your feet wet in terms of what information you want, and then maybe move to a program later on. Most of the time, something like an Excel spreadsheet or an Access database can be migrated into a program that you will purchase, or the CUPS program, you can use an Excel-based approach to get data into there. So sometimes, you know, starting simpler and then working up to what you want a program to do will be a little bit better for you. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dawn to talk about some other resources that we have available to you.
Thanks, Heather. Hello, everybody. So I'm going to talk to you about the tools that we have available on our website, and we're going to start with some inventory tools. So first, I wanted to let everyone know about an inventory reference guide that we've made available, and the website is shown here. And I'm going to show you this document as well. So what this document provides is information on where to look for particular data for each asset category that you might have. So you can see on your screen, there we have hydrants and different types of hydrants, and what type of data you might need to collect in the field, and what type of data you might need to collect in the office. So if you look through the document, you can see that there are many different types of assets listed and resources for what type of information to gather. So that's available to you at the website, at the EFC Network website. It's also on the EFC Network's webinar page. It's a direct link, so you can get to it from multiple places. And then all of the information that I will be talking about today is available as part of our AM Can Work manual that Heather mentioned. And the website for it is listed here. It is on the Southwest EFC website, southwestefc.unm.edu/AMKAN. And this does have a username and password requirement. So the username is AMCanWork, and the password, I'm not going to try and pronounce, but it's AMCanWork backwards. So you can access that website and download any of these resources that we're presenting today. The first resource that I will talk about is our asset inventory table. So this is an example of the table, and again, it's available in Word document as a Microsoft Excel document. You can download them, you can print them, you can add your logos to them, you can do whatever you would like to do with them. But it's just a tool for you to be able to track your inventory. And in this table, you can see that we ask you for things like ID number, category, type, size. And if you have questions about how to do any of those, what's a good asset ID number? There are references in the manual. There are tools that tell you how to come up with a good ID number. There are tools that help you determine condition assessment. There are tools that can help you pick a category and a type. So all of those things are made available to you in the Asset Management Manual. And all of the resources that we will talk about today are also part of that manual. So this is the website for those resources. And I will show you that page as well. So once you get into the Asset Management Manual, the very last tab on the right is Resources. And this is where you can download any of the documents that I've shown you today or that I will be showing you today. So the database is there, the inventory spreadsheet, and then everything that's in each of the appendices. So Appendix A has the inventory table, and the inventory spreadsheet is listed right above it. So if we take a look at the inventory spreadsheet, it has the same categories, but if you're more comfortable using Microsoft Excel than using a Microsoft Word table, that information is here. And what's nice about using Microsoft Excel is if you have assets that are energy users, you can link the asset IDs on the Energy tab. So here you could take your ID number and put that it's equal to whatever's in this table, and it will show up the same. So if I put ABC123 in here, it will also show up on the Energy Inventory tab. So that spreadsheet's available to you. And this energy use inventory asks questions about what type of energy you're using, what's the horsepower rating, is it variable speed, and then if you have the opportunity to measure the power, if you're in the field and you have the ability to measure the power that that specific asset is using, you would put that here. Or if you can't measure it, you would calculate it based on horsepower and hours of operation to get your total kilowatt hours per year. If you know peak, you would record that. Make sure that you're documenting your average run times, and that will help you calculate your total cost per year. Operating status is just if you have an asset that's not online right now, or if it is online, you can just make a note of if it's operating currently, or if it's a standby, or if it's a spare. How do you operate that particular energy using asset? Design specifications, particularly for a pump. Is it designed to pump 100 gallons a minute, but you're using it to pump 50 gallons a minute, so you throttle a valve or something of that nature. So that's just where you would document those types of things to know that it's using more energy than it needs to, or that it's operating the way that it was designed to operate. So that's the inventory table and spreadsheet. And then one of the other tools that we have available is the database. So this is what the asset inventory database will look like when you download it and open it. And we do provide instructions along with it that you can download. So the instructions are just a simple Word document. It tells you how to get started. It tells you about the different types of data that you will need to enter. And then it tells you about the reports that you can print. And at the very end of the document are definitions for the field. So if you're a little bit confused about what it's asking for, this goes into more detail about what you should be entering into the fields in the database. So when you download the database and you open it, you'll see this screen. And when you first get started, you'll have to collect data before you can start. But the place to start is with adding new street names. And this is because all of your assets are going to be tied to a location. So starting with your street names is an easy place to start. You should have most of your street name records in your billing documents already. So you could just import those directly, or you can type them in individually. So here you can type in a street name and then a street abbreviation. And this is so that you can tie the asset ID number to the asset location. So this might just be the first 3 letters of each street, and then the street abbreviation. So if it was street or road or lane, you could just put that. But this is any type of abbreviation that you would like to use. And you can keep going by pressing your tab key, and it brings up a blank form. Or when you're done entering them, you can press save and close. Once you've added street names, you can start adding your inventory information. So this is what that table looks like. So you would come up with your asset ID number, and then you will pick which category it's in, whether it's a pump or a source, any of these categories. And if you find your categories not listed, you can go and add more categories. You can add asset type, you can add asset size. I had the error because I didn't put an asset ID number in, and it asked you to do that first. So I apologize for not following my own rules. And then we have information about the price. None of these fields are mandatory other than asset ID number. So if you don't know the information to start with, you don't have to put dummy data in. You can leave it blank. And then you can do your asset criticality. You can record information about the energy using assets and the supplier for the asset. So once you're done, you save and close. And it takes you back to the main screen. So you can see that you've got buttons for entering all new data, and then you have buttons for editing or changing existing data. And then this third category down here is reports. This is where you can view what's being tracked in the database. So you can view which of your assets are critical. You can view which types of assets are in each category, which assets are critical on the energy using side, a list of all the assets that use energy. And then if you're looking for projects to prioritize for energy reduction, there's an energy project decision matrix available. So if we look, I've fed some information into the database. And if you look at the critical assets report, it's looking at your total risk, and anything that's above 9 will show up in this report. Any risk that's above 9 will show up in your critical assets report. So here you can see that this well pump has a risk of 12. So there's more than one asset logged into this database, but only one of them has a risk greater than 12. You show assets by category. So it asks you to pick which asset category you want to show. And if we say pumps, it'll generate a report showing that there's a booster pump and all of the information that you've recorded about it. So you can see here that we haven't recorded the model, the serial number, the supplier. So those were blank fields, didn't force you to put dummy information in. You can just put in what you know, and then you can update it as you learn more about your assets. The energy using assets is the same thing. It'll generate a report. So you can see here we have a booster pump and a well pump. So we've got the categories under pumps and sources, and it tells you where they're located. All of the information that you fed in as raw data comes out in the report. And then it does some calculations for you. So you put in your measured power consumption, you put in your hours of operation, and then it calculates the total cost to operate those pumps per year for electricity. So the reports are there. And as you go through the database, if you want to add logos or titles, or you want to add reports, all of that's possible. You can edit this database. It's not protected outside of that. When it opens straight to this screen. But you can get into the back end by holding down Shift when you open the database, and it will let you change and edit anything you want. So if you have someone that has Microsoft Access training or some programming experience, they would be able to help you add reports, add pictures or logos or anything that you want. So this database is available to use as is, or to be edited to meet your needs. Bear with me here. I'm just going to put our contact information up so that you guys can see it and have it. And we will take questions from you guys at this time. If you've got any questions, feel free to type them in, and we will answer them as they come in. So let us know if you've got questions about the tools available. Heather, would you like to add anything to our conversation?
I just wanted to reiterate what Dawn was talking about. Is the spreadsheet and the database were just meant to be starting points for a system that wanted to kind of get started in an asset inventory and didn't kind of know, even where to begin. These Excel spreadsheet and Access database can help you just to get going, to get an idea of what information to collect, give you some opportunities to collect it. But it was in no means meant to be the be-all, end-all, perfect, spreadsheet or database. So feel free to modify them, however you need to make it more appropriate for your own system. And feel free to think of these as starting places again so that you can start to get information about your assets, have somewhere to put it, and then later on when you get a little bit more comfortable with the idea of an asset inventory and what you want to include in it, you might want to migrate to something that's more sophisticated, something that's tied to, say, a work order system, for example, or something that's tied to a GIS map that can save data locationally. So keep in mind that you may ultimately want to go into some other program, but these are ways to get you started without you having to do, all the upfront work to get it going. And feel free to migrate from this to something else later. But it's better to kind of think through what you want before you go buy something, because we've talked to many, many utilities who have spent money on a program and then it really didn't do exactly what they wanted, but now that they've spent money, it's hard to kind of go back and buy something else. So rather than getting into that situation, if you start with a simpler thing like the database or the spreadsheet and get going, then maybe once you've gotten a little more comfortable with what data you want to store, what reports you would like to have, then you can go buy a program that will meet your needs and include maybe billing if you wanted to, or work order if you wanted to, or again GIS. So just keep that in mind, that these are tools to kind of just help you get started.
All right, Heather, so we've got a fair number of questions coming in.
Okay.
So one of the questions is, where did you say that we can find the resources for assigning asset ID numbers? And that information is available in Appendix A of the AM Can Work Manual. And the links were in this presentation, and this presentation will be made available to everyone that attends today. And it will also be posted on the EFC Network website. So you'll be able to get the links to the AM Can Work Manual, and then in Appendix A are the resources that give you tips for assigning asset ID numbers.
Yeah, in that appendix there's actually 3 different examples of utilities, some real utilities who have given us their examples. I mean, there's not identifying information in there, but just the way that they ID'd their assets is included. And then in Chapter 3, there's some text that also talks about asset ID numbers. And so there's a couple of different, there's a discussion of asset ID numbers in Chapter 3, and then the resources for how, some examples for how to do asset ID numbers is available in that Appendix A.
And there's a question, Heather, do you have a list of requirements for an asset management system from funding agencies?
Generally speaking, there is not such a thing, but in New Mexico we've actually developed a guide that has been adopted by the state and all the funding agencies within the state as how they're going to view asset management, and we'd be happy to make a link available or provide that out to the attendees of the webinar. It's not per se a list of requirements, but rather it's kind of what should be in a document like that, an asset inventory that includes certain kinds of information, a map. So it's that type of thing, and it is based off of the AM Can Work guide, so it's a shortened version of that and kind of in an outline form, so I would be happy to share that. Most states seem to be following some version of the 5 core concepts, which is really the basis for the AM Can Work manual, and having people do, kind of those components, which again is sort of shown in the AMIQ. We walk through what are the 5 core components and what's included in there. So I think between the IQ, which kind of helps you figure out what should be in the plan, and then the guide that New Mexico has put together, that gives you an idea of the kinds of things that state agencies would be looking for. So we'll share out the New Mexico guide with everyone.
And another question, does the database include lifespans of assets? The database does include some very generic asset life expectancies, but what we like to tell people is that you know more about your assets than I do. So the table for life expectancy, for asset life expectancy, is in the database and is one of the links, one of the buttons that you can click to edit. So you should look at what we've put in that are fairly broadly defined guidelines and see if it matches up with your experience. And if not, you should change those lifespans or life expectancies to match up with your system's experience. So there are some in there, but you don't have to stick with what's in there. Sorry, you guys all know my weather now, huh? but that is available for use and for editing. Is there a link to download the PowerPoint presentation? There will be one provided to you at the end of this webinar, and then it will be on the EFC network as well. Another question, can you pull the inventory information back out in the form of a spreadsheet? Say you want to switch programs midstream. From Microsoft Access, you can export any of your tables to Excel quite easily. So yes, that is quite possible.
And that's one of the reasons that, we kind of provided an Excel and an Access as opposed to something else is, generally speaking, and it's not always true, but generally speaking, if you have information in an Excel table, it's pretty exportable to something else. A lot of the programs that are on the market allow you to either use Access or Excel as a starting point, and then you can export that information into their program. So we were kind of trying to allow you to use it as a starting point without having to re-enter bunches of data. So generally speaking, if you have information in Excel and Access, usually that can be exportable to a program. It's not always true, but oftentimes it's exportable. And that might be something, if you do want to go to a more sophisticated program that you want to buy, that would be a question to ask the people who are making the software. Will it take an Excel table or an Access database? How would I go about exporting it? And if there's a choice between two of them and one of them allows you to export and one doesn't, you might want to go to something that allows you to export it, just so that it would be easier for you to get the data in there.
And a question about the database street name. Does the database include latitude, longitude information? In a disaster, the street name may not be visible out in the field. That's an excellent question. The street name field can include as much or as little as you want, and I know not all assets are tied to a street. So we use street name kind of as a field for location, or however you want it to be. So you could put street name, comma, latitude, comma, longitude, or if you wanted to, you could go into the table and add a column just for latitude, longitude. We didn't want to make it mandatory for those that don't have their system in, with GIS data or latitude, longitude data, so to speak. But you are able to include it. The field's not limited. So you can put in the street name field the location in whatever form makes the most sense to you.
And then we know sometimes it's just a dirt road or something like that. If you can provide a description, dirt road leading up to the storage tank or something like that, that's a way you can do it, because I know sometimes in some of the smaller utilities there's not always a street name. Sometimes it's got to be more of a descriptive title rather than a name itself.
Will this cover or schedule maintenance and cost? This database is not a maintenance management system. It is designed to track your inventory, not to generate work orders. Again, because we wanted to keep it focused on asset management inventory and to not complicate it too much. I am sure that we could tie this to a CMMS program, a computerized maintenance and management systems. I am sure that there are Microsoft Access programs for tracking maintenance and scheduling and costs, but at this time it's not doing scheduling and cost tracking for maintenance.
And that's something, there are many, 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 many programs on the market today that are for that purpose, and we were not trying to duplicate all of those. There's some really, really good programs on the market, and so if you want to do a computerized maintenance management system, I would suggest you explore the various options that are out there. Maybe ask other utilities what they're using and if they like it, what they like and don't like, and maybe consider purchasing one, because it does get a lot more complicated to develop a program that will do scheduling, maintenance, and tracking costs, and we were not trying to develop that complex of a program. We were trying to give a starting point for smaller utilities. I've actually seen several utilities who have developed their own Access databases that include maintenance tracking and cost tracking, just by starting with Access and building from there. And there are some really, really good things going on out there. So if you have somebody that's very computer savvy, they may easily be able to add modules that could do the management tasks that you have in your utility and cost track. So you might want to check around if you have some folks that have a little bit of computer skills. they can probably program for you some extra modules that will do that, or again, like I said, you could buy a program that does that.
We had a question about what tools are available for Mac users.
You know, we haven't specifically designed things for Mac users. Now, I know you can buy the Word suite for Mac, and I believe, Don, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe if you buy the Word suite for Mac, I mean not the Word, but the Microsoft Office suite for Mac, I believe these programs would run on a Mac if you have that suite of programs. Is that correct? Do you know?
That would be my assumption too. I'm not a Mac user though. We have other people on that are Mac users, so maybe they can help.
Yeah, my understanding, I mean, we have a Mac at home, but I use a PC normally, and I haven't had any trouble. If I have, say, an Excel spreadsheet or an Access database or something like that, I am able to pull it up on my Mac with my Microsoft Office suite programs. We haven't specifically developed tools using the Mac version. I mean, I can't remember the name of the program, but I know there are Mac versions that are similar to Excel and Access, and we haven't developed any programs for those specifically. But if you get the Apple version of the Microsoft Office, you should be able to use these tools, the Word tools, the Excel tools, and the Access tools on your Mac.
All right. We wanted to let you know that we will send out a link in just a few minutes to everyone to have you complete an evaluation for this webinar. So give us your feedback about the webinar. And we will also put together a list of question and answers from this session and make those available online. We have a poll question that we would like to share with you guys just to see if you're interested in further assistance. So if Lisa, you can bring up the poll question, if you would all take just a minute to answer it, we would certainly appreciate it.
Sure, here comes the poll.
And in this case, what we're asking about is part of our project that Lisa was describing at the beginning, we call it Smart Management for Small Water Systems, involves the ability for us to provide some technical assistance for small water systems. And small water systems are defined as those serving a population of 10,000 and fewer for the purposes of this particular project. And we can help in any managerial and financial area. The assistance is primarily going to be over the phone, over email, over webinar, you know, that kind of thing. But once in a while, it can be done face-to-face depending on, you know, if we're going to be in an area doing some other activities, we can double team sometimes. So if you're interested in hearing more about technical assistance, or you have a particular need, like you would like some help with a budget or reviewing a rate, or you know, hey, we've started this inventory process, do you have any suggestions about, you know, this or that? Go ahead and let us know that, and we'll be happy to try to help as many folks as we can with whatever issues your system is having.
All right, at this time I will close that poll.
All right, and Lisa, you can maybe answer the last question that just came in.
Sure, let me see. Okay, so this question is regarding receiving a certificate of attendance for this webinar. And we are working with AWWA to supply attendees for our webinars with certificates. So if you are applying for CEU credits, they will be available to you. That will come to you automatically. A link to access your certificate will come to you automatically in an email from AWWA. It usually takes about a month for that email to get to you. And if you have any questions about that process, you can email educationservices@awwa.org, and I will go ahead and shoot that email address out to everyone so that in case you are interested in pursuing credits and have questions, you have that email address. So there it goes.
All right, just as a reminder, as just a couple wrap-up comments, again, these resources are available through the Southwest EFC website or the efcnetwork.org website. You'll be able to access a recording of this webinar within a few days following the webinar, and you can always listen to it later if you've forgotten something. We will also make the slides available, and we will share with you a couple of things in the future. We'll share with you the link to the AWWA survey on asset management practice, so that again we encourage as many water utilities as possible to take that survey, so that we can gather information for kind of what the current state of asset management practice is and where the biggest needs are, because that's a way to help you. If we understand what the needs are, we can better provide both AWWA as an organization and then ourselves for small systems. We can better provide you with resources to help you as you move forward in your practice. And then probably through the written question and answer section, we will go ahead and make that guide available that I mentioned for New Mexico that kind of gives you an idea of, from a state's perspective, what the state of New Mexico is looking for in an asset management program. Again, your state might be slightly different, but I think their approach is generic enough that you'll be able to have a pretty good idea of what a funder or regulator might be looking for in an asset management program. And with that, unless we have had any other questions, I think we're about ready to wrap up.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us, and thank you to our excellent presenters today. We will be following up with everyone accordingly, and I hope you all have a wonderful day. Thanks.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Bye.